Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
5:06. It's Thursday morning, and you bet we're ready to go. I hope you are too. The 17th day of August. It's O'Connor and Company. Thank you for letting us into your lives. Hopefully, it'll become a bit of a habit for you. Coming up at 6:35, Laura Reese, Director of Border Security over at Heritage Foundation. 7:35, Carrie Rist. She's a mother of 5 school-age kids, and she's running for Prince William County School Board. At 8:35, the Attorney General of Virginia, Jason Miyares. Boy, we've got a lot to talk with him about. And thank goodness I have some help. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Patrice Onwuka. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday, Larry.
No Thursday, right? No Thursday.
No Thursday. No.
That's not a thing. That's not a thing.
No, not at all.
Listen, one of the things that Attorney General Jason Miyares, who will be our guest at 8:35, one of the things that he is focused on is the crime problem and the fact that we've got, especially in Northern Virginia, we have a whole host of politicians who tend to second guess what our police officers know how to do in terms of enforcing the law and going after the bad guys and keeping bad guys off the street. And we've got politicians who tie the hands of cops and tell them not to follow tried and true law enforcement policies that have been in place for decades. All for political reasons, all for social justice reasons, racial equity, et cetera. Or you've got these Commonwealth attorneys in Virginia and in other places in the country, states attorneys, district attorneys, who decide to just ignore the law, ignore sentencing guidelines. They use what they call their prosecutorial discretion to just, I saw the DA of Los Angeles County, George Gascon, who almost faced a recall effort. Instead, he's just up for re-election, and looks like he's not going to win because the liberal left in L.A. is done with him. He put out a graphic yesterday showing that in the 3 years that he's been the district attorney in Los Angeles County, they have not arrested anybody on drug-related charges.
My goodness.
And he's bragging about it. He showed this graph where it showed the arrests, going from 600 a year to 0. And he's proud. He's bragging about that.
Ugh.
And it's because of racial equity, Patrice, which, again, by the way, I find to be the most racist thing. We're not going to prosecute drug crimes anymore because it's not fair to black people. Wait a minute. I know a lot of black people who don't even drink alcohol, let alone take drugs. What kind of racism is that? But that's what we're living with right now.
Well, and you know what? The people who suffer in communities that are targeted, whether it's the small business owners who have open-air drug markets in front of their stores, keeping away customers, or the random victims of crime from some of these drug dealers and frankly addicts, they happen to be black. So this idea that they're somehow helping the black race by not enforcing drug laws it's insulting at best.
Because more often than not, the victims are black.
Yes.
You really want to help black people, you put the bad guys away.
Exactly.
Justice should be blind. That's the whole point. And if a perpetrator is black or white, and what they do is they just say, oh, yeah, we're not picking and choosing who to prosecute or not. We're just not going to prosecute anybody.
Well, that doesn't help anybody at all.
Anyone at all. So we have several stories here along those lines that show what many cities are faced with now because of this new trend that goes back to 2020. And I truly believe that a big part of the reason why the media echoed these stories of George Floyd and the riots and Black Lives Matter and the virtue signaling of corporations, a big part of it is because they wanted chaos. They wanted people to feel unsettled. They wanted people to be angry and afraid because they had an election to win.
Well, that's right, and they could capitalize on all of that to say, okay, turn your control over to the people who are in charge and know how to handle things.
Well, partly, and also partly, it's like, you're seeing riots in the streets, you're seeing people angry, you're seeing people at their throats. It's because of that man we have in the White House. It's because we elected this bad, evil, horrible, mean-spirited person, and he's made the rest of the country bad, horrible, and mean-spirited. It was all part of a greater narrative.
Yeah. A false narrative at that.
Oh, totally. So now we've got some cities that are reaping, sadly, the circumstances. Let's start in Minnesota. This is an amazing story where, of course, that was the origins of the George Floyd story. That was the genesis of the defund the police movement. And to be fair, this is not Minneapolis proper, but it's in the suburbs of Minneapolis, a city called Goodhue, 65 miles southeast of Minneapolis, about 1,000 residents. And the mayor showed up to work one day last week, and every single cop quit, including the chief of police.
Crazy.
They all just walked off the job. They said enough.
Well, not surprisingly, they're not being paid adequately in their eyes, and they're not getting the kind of support and attention that they need. They're overstretched and overworked. And so this is not surprising. When you demoralize the police, when you remove funding for the police to actually do their jobs and to hire police, then you can't find new ones, and then the current ones decide to quit.
That's right. That's exactly right. And they've been trying. They have trouble getting anyone who's interested in being a cop. They only have a handful. 1,000 residents in the city. They only have a handful of full-time employees.
Yeah.
But this all stems from the hard work that cops have to put in, the low pay that they get, and then to boot, they're thrown under the bus by their politicians, by elected officials who blame them for everything. They can't win, and it's like, who wants to be a cop here? Who wants to be a cop?
So it's interesting. So the pay for them is about $22 an hour, and the police chief is saying that's considerably lower than a lot of other locales, neighboring departments that are offering 30 and over with benefits.
Right.
So when you're going to put your life on the line, Larry, you're going to go out there, and you never know whether you're going to come home to see your wife and children every night. For barely above minimum, $22 an hour is not a huge salary. It's understandable that these guys would say, you know what, I'm going to go somewhere else where I can make more money, probably either, get overtime or have more time at home with my family. And the residents of this town are the ones who are left holding the bag. But where are the leaders? How is the mayor blindsided by this? That's what I don't understand.
He didn't see it coming, shows up to work, and exactly. Listen, even in Mayberry, they made sure Barney Fife had a good living wage, okay? Meanwhile, in Philadelphia, a somewhat larger city, again, police have been hands off. Oh, let people blow. Remember what the mayor of Baltimore said during the riots up there? They got to blow off steam. Let them blow off steam. And this sort of like just this assumption that crime's going to happen, violence is going to happen. So, hey, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Well, if you're a business owner, you have to come up with something to try to protect your investment. So Philadelphia businesses are now setting up their own makeshift booby traps. They've got hidden sprinklers.
Crazy.
That because these open air drug markets have taken hold right in front, like on the sidewalks in front of their businesses or on their streets where they're trying to conduct business. So they've got all these various booby traps to fend off all the drug dealers because the cops aren't doing it. The cops won't move them along because the cops have been told by politicians, you can't do that.
So obviously, if you're a business owner, you're going to do whatever it takes to stay in business. I don't blame them. Whether you have to pour hot water, just throw some hot water out the door every 3 hours. Wherever it lands, it lands.
Oh my God! Wait, we do not recommend anybody do that. That you might.
All right,
I'm
joking. You can pour some water on the pavement.
Dig a
it doesn't
moat,
have
perhaps.
to be hot.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe install those sprinklers to water, put out a little patch of grass, right? And then install sprinklers that just sprinkle over the entire area in front of your store. But it's sad that business owners have to take these types of matters into their own hands. Now, what's going to happen. There's going to be some shisty lawyer who gets with a drug addict and says, hey, you want to make some big cash for your habit? I have an idea.
Yeah.
Let's go set up a sting. Go out there and then hurt yourself in front of the store. We're going to sue those guys.
That's right.
And we're going to go take them for everything they've got.
100%. Or even if it doesn't take a lawyer, it will be a city council member or a mayor who will say this is unacceptable behavior. They're going to shut off all the booby traps that they've set up to keep the drug dealers away, and they won't do anything about the drug dealers. They won't do anything about the homeless. They won't do anything about the criminal vagrants. All right. So that's all going on elsewhere. What about Washington, D.C., where these problems are even more intensified? Well, some lawmakers on Capitol Hill, they've actually come up with a pretty good idea how to save Washington. We'll tell you what their idea is in a moment. First, it's 5:15.
Mark Levin, weeknights from 6 till 9.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Patrice Onwuka. Patrice,
Yes.
I like you. We follow a lot of people who work in the government and for elected officials on our social media pages so we can track what's going on with various congressmen and committee and things like that.
For sure.
But it also turns out not only do we get information that way from tracking them on social media, but they also share what's going on in their personal lives while they're living here in Washington, D.C. You get a good flavor of what it's like to live in the district. J.P. Ferrer is the comms director for the Ways and Means Committee, okay? So very important, very powerful committee, and he is in charge of communications, and he lives in D.C. So he put out a video on Twitter last night. It lasts about 2 minutes, but it shows a guy. This is on Florida Avenue, U Street Northwest, okay? Florida.
Yeah, it's a great neighborhood,
wonderful
very up-and-coming neighborhood. Hot spots, bars, rooftops,
absolutely, and the district government encouraged businesses to take up residents there.
Oh, yeah.
To help bring it, because that's right. It's like for 15 minutes. It shows this guy, and this isn't like at 3 a.m. It's just like in the evening, trying to break into a storefront with a crowbar.
My goodness.
This is a high-end eyeglass spectacles store, Warby Parker. They sell sunglasses, they sell glasses, high-end stuff. And his video, he's just a guy on living there in the neighborhood, shows this guy brazenly. It's a corner store, well lit. He's in a hoodie. He's got a crowbar, and he tries for 15 minutes to break into the store. No one calls the police. No police cruiser happens to be driving by on patrol to take a look at the neighborhood to see if anything's happening. Cars are driving by. People are walking by. Nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And,
I mean, this is a neighborhood that's transitioned, but you still have a lot of elements going through this area. And this guy is an element. He was ready to steal whatever he could. He had a bag with him.
Yep.
So obviously he was going to be taking all of those glasses, very fashionable. Warby Parker is well known, and he was going to resell them. But this is D.C.
This is D.C.
And
That's
this is not just the ward in D.C. where, that kind of thing happens. This is the part of D.C. where a lot of yuppies, young professionals, families, they're hanging out, they're walking around. And this is what makes the city increasingly more dangerous and feel more dangerous.
You're right. And I think it's disgusting and despicable and, frankly, racist that for decades, for time immemorial, there has been this attitude in this town. It's like, oh, well, that's Ward 8. That sort of thing happens down there. What do you mean that sort of thing happens? Those are citizens. People have to live there.
Yeah,
People are raising their family, and you get drive-by shootings all the time. We only get attention when the shooting happens in Northwest D.C. But the nightly shooting that happens down in Ward 8, down in Southeast D.C., that's just that neighborhood. That's disgusting, okay? So you're right, but this has happened all across the district. It's become uninhabitable. I keep saying the district is broken, and what my impression of it here, as somebody who has not lived in Washington D.C. my entire life, I have lived in other major cities before though, and I've seen what works and I've seen what doesn't work. And as far as I'm concerned, the problem in D.C. is home rule. Home rule is an experiment that no longer works, and I'm not alone anymore. 3 Republicans in the House of Representatives have now presented a bill that would repeal the D.C. Home Rule Act. And we'll give you the details on that in just a moment. It's 5:21. The D.C. Home Rule Act was passed in 1973, and like bell-bottom jeans and polyester leisure suits, this also, coming out of the 1970s, was a bad idea. The way we have it now with the district council and the mayor, and Congress merely having the power to veto legislation and overturn it. This is a relatively new development. Like I said, it's only in the last, 50 years has it been like this. Prior to that, D.C. was a very different town, and it was managed in a very different way. And according to Representative Andy Ogles, Republican of Tennessee, he thinks we should go back to it. Here's his quote. In the first 5 days of August, D.C. saw 13 homicides. The nation's capital has been overrun with violent crime, drugs, theft, homelessness, and riots. Where's the lie there? The Constitution places the authority and responsibility of D.C. administration with the Congress, not with the D.C. mayor, not with the D.C. City Council. Congress needs to reclaim its constitutional authority and make our nation's capital safe again. Now, this will be called racist. So, because
it already is in the Washington Post, yeah.
Yeah, predominantly black town, and they're not allowed to make decisions for themselves. Actually, the victims, by the way, of this bad governance are black people, so maybe we're trying to help black people with this. And also, one of the three sponsors of this bill is Byron Donalds, an African-American Republican from Florida. So I've never asked you how you feel about it. I really do believe that home rule is a broken experiment. It needs to be fixed, and this is the first step of fixing it.
Well, I would like to believe that this would be a good step. I don't know, because the question then I think is, well, who is going to actually take over the management of the city? It's sad, though. I agree that we've seen Congress have to step in and stop this ridiculous crime bill that was passed by the city council, and has led to the increased spike in violence. I think it's worth seeing what could replace.
Yeah.
The city council and the mayor, but you also have some of those ward citizen-driven boards that I think would probably be removed. And so, as long as there's a vehicle for the citizens to be able to have their voice, and frankly for crime to come down, whoever takes the lead on that, then I'm open to the idea of it.
It is 5:29. It's 5:37 now. It's O'Connor and Company on this Thursday morning in your nation's capital. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, we've got a busy lineup starting at 6:35 with Laura Reese, Director of Border Security at Heritage. 7:35, Carrie Rist running for Prince William County School Board down in Prince William County. 8:35, Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares. All that, plus Patrice Onwuka all morning long on this Thursday. Good morning, Patrice.
Hey, Larry.
Hey. So yesterday, something really good happened in North Carolina. We love having good news. Roy Cooper is the governor of North Carolina. He is a Democrat. He had a bill presented to him that would protect women in that state, young girls in that state, in their private spaces, locker rooms, restrooms. The bill basically said that, first of all, women's sports was meant for biological women, and men should not compete. And also, more importantly, that the locker rooms, that a young girl, a 14-year-old girl, getting dressed for a swim meet or a softball game or a volleyball match, would not have to endure being exposed to naked male genitalia without her consent. Seems like something that I would...
sounds pretty reasonable.
Right? That's really the only way to present this case. That a young girl should not be presented with fully intact male genitalia in her private, while she is disrobing without her consent. In fact, even with her consent in a public school room, it shouldn't happen.
Shouldn't be. Yeah.
The governor, the Democrat, vetoed that bill, of course. But what the good news here is that yesterday the North Carolina House voted 74-45 to override that veto.
Very good.
With bipartisan support. And so it will be the law of the state of North Carolina, despite the Democrat governor deciding that, yes, your young daughters at the age of 14 or younger should be exposed to a fully intact male penis without her approval or consent. That's the position. That's the mainstream position of the Democrats now, by the way. That's where we are.
Well, it's so interesting to look at all of the headlines right now in different news outlets. They're focusing less on the protection of the privacy of young girls, biological girls, and they're positioning this as some sort of loss of rights among a small minority of trans youth. Well, wait a minute. No, this is literally just saying these girls should have a right to privacy and should have a right not to have to be exposed, as you rightly said, to men in spaces where they would not feel comfortable about it.
Right.
And so, it's so interesting how they're trying to hijack this language and make it seem like there's some sort of erosion of loss of right. If you're a transgender youth, you can go to the bathroom. You can use a locker room to change. The point, though, is that this is about ensuring that women, biological women, have safe places. And as a young girl, I've been one myself before, there is nothing more important than being able to be comfortable to wherever you have a private moment, to feel safe in that private moment.
Yeah. And it is interesting the way the media is spinning this as a loss of rights. It's also somewhat diabolical. A minute and a half ago, everyone in this country, for the most part, agreed that young girls should be able to be in their own private space without being intruded by a biological male. This is not some loss of a right that was laid out in the Magna Carta. It's quite the opposite. But more infuriating, believe it or not, is what we heard from one of the Democrats who was not in favor of overriding this veto, who does want young girls to have to be subjected to naked biological men in their locker room without their consent. Here's Representative Maria Cervania dismissing girls' concerns. Listen to her framing of the issue.
I get disheartened by the narrative that is actually being said. A locker room. And I'm not going to dismiss the insecurities or the events that may have happened to young women. Or
the insecurities? So if you stand up and say, I shouldn't have to get disrobed before a biological man in my space with that you're just being insecure?
Wait a minute. What about the insecurity among the the kid who feels like they're a trans kid? They're insecure about their biological gender. But we'll hold that.
It's not insecurities, though. It's a question of say here. You know what? So the Democrats think if you oppose this, you're just being insecure, I guess. Here's Riley Gaines, who is not even a minor. She was an adult woman in the NCAA, and she had to deal with this.
6'4" male walks in, disrobes, and is fully intact with male genitalia while we're simultaneously undressing as 18 to 22-year-old girls, and we could do nothing about it. I actually immediately left the locker room, and I went up to one of the officials on the pool deck, and I said, how is this allowed to happen? I understand the guidelines for the competition, but what are the guidelines in regards to the locker room? And he looks at me and word for word says, oh, we actually got around this by making the locker rooms unisex, so it's not a big deal. And I thought about that, and unisex. So this meant that any man could have walked into our locker room, not just a self-identifying female. Any man, any coach, any parent, any official, any man who wanted to would have had full access to, and bare minimum, we weren't forewarned.
Yeah, that is exactly it, and it's because of policies that are supported by Democrat-elected officials. Thankfully, they're in the minority, and they're being overridden across the board, like it just happened last night in North Carolina. But to write off, does Riley Gaines sound insecure to you?
No, she sounds like a very bright and very, she just recognizes common sense, and she recognizes being in that position of vulnerability. And I think it's good that we have people like her speaking out about this.
And she's not alone. Here's a young lady, a minor. She was in high school. Blake Ellen is her name. She spoke out in her local town.
It's a huge thing. Everyone's asking, so why aren't you allowed in the locker room?
High school student Blake Ellen and her teammates are currently barred from using the locker room after some of the girls on the team objected to allowing a transgender player in the girls' locker room.
My mom wants me to do this interview to try to make a change.
Ellen says the dispute started when the trans student made an inappropriate comment while members of the volleyball team were getting changed.
And when one of the girls complained about it, their solution was to kick all of the girls out of the locker room.
So wait, so the trans student can make an inappropriate comment. Who knows what that comment is? And it's fine. And number one, it's fine for them to be that person to be there, and then for them to be making inappropriate comments, and they're not, and the school does not address that. Yeah. This is totally political and a radical ideology-driven agenda.
Yep, and they are against you, mom and dad. They are against your daughters being safe and being protected, and they're dismissing them.
Women?
Yeah.
What happened to believe all women?
They're dismissing them as insecure because of their concerns over this. And listen, this entire thing is going to get framed as it moves forward into next year's presidential election as kindness. If you want to, bar transgender athletes from sports and from women's locker rooms, you're not being kind. Well, I just want you right now to listen to what they're saying and recognize who's being kind and who's being unkind to your daughter, to our daughters. Thank God sanity prevailed in North Carolina yesterday, much in part because of your organization, Independent Women's Voice, advocating in North Carolina. Yes. Well done. 544. We have an update out of Fulton County, Georgia, and this really doesn't have to do with the details of the ridiculous, unprofessional, frankly unconstitutional indictments laid out against Donald Trump and the attorneys who advised him. No, it has to do with the fiasco that day. If you remember, Patrice, that afternoon, we expected something to happen. This was Monday afternoon. We expected something to come out of Fulton County because you'll remember Friday, Merrick Garland named David Weiss as the special counsel to investigate Hunter Biden. That meant all weekend the media couldn't really finally ignore the Biden crimes and the Biden cover-ups and all of the lies that have been told. So it was a really bad news cycle. So they had to do something to change the subject. So we expected there to be some indictments of Donald Trump. That's the pattern of behavior. That's what always happens. Literally, that is what always has happened for the last 6 months. And sure enough, in the middle of the day, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office published a list of indictments of Donald Trump. It's shocking. It's like, what the heck? What is this? The jury hasn't even voted on this yet. The grand jury hasn't even voted. This hasn't been approved by the judge. And suddenly we've got this list of indictments. And then you remember after, I think, an hour, they pulled that back.
They pulled it back down. Yeah.
Pulled it back down. And the spokesperson for the DA said that was fictitious. That was not real. Not sure how it happened. That was so. It's like, what? You've been hacked?
Yeah, it was a fake. We were told that it was. Yeah. Don't believe what you saw.
Right. That was nothing. Right. And then they have to scramble, and then they do get their vote of their grand jury later in the afternoon. They do get the judge to finally sign off, and then cobbled together, at the last minute, literally like right before midnight, the district attorney came out and read off all of the indictments and gave her press conference because she wants to be governor of Georgia someday. And it turns out that the indictments were basically exactly what had been put out earlier in the day. So it's like, okay, what's going on here? You put this out. You said it was fake. It clearly wasn't fake. Somebody's lying. Were you hacked? Well, now we have the story. See, and it's up to you to decide. We report. You decide. The district attorney's office in Fulton County is either totally corrupt or completely incompetent. It could be both, I guess. But
it could be both. So they're now claiming that this was just a simple administrative mistake, an oops.
Yeah,
where
an error.
They were doing a test run of publishing these charges online, and the person clicked send instead of save, and I believe AP News got access first to saw the files online, and then I guess calls were made really quickly, and they had to retract it. Either way, human error or intentional, I don't think it was human error. I think it was intentional, Larry.
I think they got ahead of themselves. They said, "Yeah, we're going to get the indictments today, so let's." And then somebody just said they published.
Exactly. Let's just put it up there, put it in the save draft, and they
And then somebody pointed out, wait a second, you can't announce this before the grand jury even officially votes on the indictment. And you know how these arrogant DAs, they always brag about how they can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich, as if that's a good thing. That's actually a symbol of corruption. I'm sorry, I don't think the ham sandwich is guilty of anything. So the fact that you're bragging that you can get a grand jury to indict that ham sandwich tells me that you have a corrupt system. Set that aside for a moment. The arrogance here is, these are the indictments. But ma'am, the grand jury hasn't voted on them. Trust me, they'll vote on them. They're my grand jury. We'll get. And so they went ahead and published them. And somebody pointed out, hey, these haven't actually been voted on. And they said, oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, well, let's take them down and we'll claim we put it out by mistake. That's where we are now.
I think that's exactly where we are. Now, the question is whether there will actually be convictions. Indictments and convictions are two very different things, and the bars are very different. And so at the end of the day, though, this Georgia attorney, prosecutor, she just wants to get a conviction. She just wants to get an indictment to be able to say, President Trump has been indicted again. Yeah. They don't really care about convictions, honestly.
You're 100%. Yeah, you said that, there's a big difference between indictments and convictions, and obviously that's true. But in the political realm, not really. All they care about is being able to say. In fact, I saw Neil Cavuto interviewing Vivek Ramaswamy the other day. I'm sorry I don't have the audio for you. It came to mind. Where, Vivek was saying, well, this seems really corrupt and it seems political. The majority of Americans believe it's political, by the way. That's not extending yourself. And Neil Cavuto, I kid you not, this is the journalist Neil Cavuto's response. Well, Mr. Ramaswamy, there are 94 indictments here. Are you telling me that all of them are made up? You're telling me that there's nothing here? as if because there's okay, so
because someone has been charged, that obviously that they're
they
guilty
must
of
be
something.
guilty. Well, how do you know they're guilty? Because they've been charged on 94 counts.
Yeah, that's
but
not
what
how
if
our-
all 94 counts are false?
That is not
Neil?
how our justice system works
No,
anyway.
it's not. But this isn't about justice. This is about politics. So, mission accomplished. It's 5:53. Coming up, President Biden had plenty to say yesterday at the White House, and we'll share much of it with you, including his plans to visit Hawaii. Next.